Don't hurt the face. I'm an actor.
You got a minute to live. Fill it with words.
Just a role. The Mandarin. See, it's not real.
Today, we're going to give credit to some amazing actors who found themselves completely underutilized in the MCU. Come on, Ben Kingsley was good enough to be in Schindler's List, but he couldn't even play the real Mandarin? Having Matt Damon be Loki in a play is one thing, but way too many stars have gone without their time to shine in the MCU, so let's give credit where it's due and celebrate some iconic actors who got stuck in less than ideal parts. Christopher Eccleston impressed sci-fi fans during his time on Doctor Who, many of whom were sad to see him leave. But perhaps no one was sadder than Eccleston himself, who worried that the BBC's handling of the situation might destroy his career entirely. He decided to head to America for a fresh start. After being made out as a villain by the BBC, he became an actual villain in Thor: The Dark World. Many Marvel fans believe this film is one of the weakest entries in the MCU, and Eccleston is pretty much unrecognizable in the film. Not only was Malekith not a particularly compelling villain, but Eccleston was disguised by his costume. He claims that he was misled by Marvel regarding the role, and was not happy about spending 6 or 7 hours per day having makeup meticulously applied. But if you're an Eccleston fan, there's hope he could return someday. Apparently, he's just as big of a fan of Thor Ragnarok as the rest of us, and says he wouldn't mind returning to the MCU if the Ragnarok team was behind the project. Plus, he could always play another comic book character since he'd look totally different in his Malekith makeup. Not everyone has what it takes to take on the lead role in a superhero movie, but we know that actor Zachary Levi has what it takes. He played the titular hero in Shazam, which was an awesome movie, and not just by the incredibly low DC standards. Everyone knows that before he took on the role of Tony Stark, Robert Downey Jr.'s acting career was in a bit of a slump. The role revitalized him, and it's surprisingly similar to what Levi went through when he took on the part of Shazam. He called the part life-changing, and admitted that he first turned down the role because he felt like he wasn't good enough. Maybe that's because he was stuck in such a minor role in the MCU with no way to escape. Marvel cast Zachary Levi as Fandral, one of the Warriors 3. Although it was a minor role, Levi had hoped it could lead to something greater. During a press tour for Shazam, he said that he felt Fandral was underutilized and he hoped to accompany the God of Thunder on some more exciting missions. But then Ragnarok happened. Not only was Levi underutilized in that minor role, but many fans feel the character Fandral should have had a bigger part to play. As the daughter of director Peter Hall and opera singer Maria Ewing, Rebecca Hall isn't exactly hurting for work in Hollywood, but she was excited at the prospect of playing the major villain of Iron Man 3. And if you've actually seen Iron Man 3, you probably know that isn't what her character Dr. Maya Hansen ended up being. Sure, she was the mastermind behind Extremis, but she sought help from Tony Stark when the real evildoer of the movie, Aldrich Killian, started putting his insidious plan into action. So what happened? Was award-winning actress Rebecca Hall not good enough? The answer is a lot simpler, and frankly more depressing. According to director Shane Black, Marvel just didn't believe fans would want to buy a female action figure. Of course, this was before Captain Marvel took in over $1 billion at the box office. Hall claims that she signed on for a substantial role, but ended up having to fight just to get a more exciting final scene in the movie. The good news is that female characters in the MCU are finally getting some recognition, but the bad news is that it's too late for Rebecca Hall, whose talents were wasted in this minor role. There's no denying that Idris Elba is a talented guy with no shortage of fans, and after the absolute waking nightmare that was the movie Cats, this role doesn't seem so bad in comparison. But even Elba himself isn't a fan of how his character Heimdall was portrayed in the MCU. At least there weren't any dancing cockroaches in the Thor franchise, but hey, the first two movies are notoriously not the best. Elba started shooting The Dark World right after he finished up a slightly more cerebral flick, Mandela: The Long Walk to Freedom. Going from playing Nelson Mandela to having a helmet glued to his head apparently didn't feel like a good career move, and Elba claims he would have walked away from the movie if it wasn't for his pesky contract. With his awesome abilities, Heimdall could have been a much more interesting character in the MCU, instead of being a glorified toll booth attendant. Like most people involved in the Thor movies, Elba's opinion on the franchise did a 180 during Ragnarok, which was the first Marvel project he enjoyed working on. But just as he finally started having fun with the role, Infinity War happened and we all said goodbye to Heimdall far too soon. Some of us love the idea of being a hero, but you have to admit that sometimes villains have a lot more fun. At least before they're inevitably defeated, that is. And actor Mads Mikkelsen is definitely no stranger to playing the bad guy, which is why it should have been amazing that he was brought onto the cast of Doctor Strange. But while his character Kaecilius had some cool spells at his disposal, he fell short of being a genuine villain. He wasn't even the big baddie of the movie. He was just a henchman of Dormammu. He didn't even have a big dramatic exit scene after a fight with Doctor Strange. He was just whisked away into another plane of existence. Regardless of who was portraying him, Kaecilius would have still been one of the least impressive Marvel villains. But the fact that he was played by Mads Mikkelsen is almost insulting. This guy played notorious evildoer Hannibal Lecter. He deserved better than being assistant to the villain. Shouldn't the star who played Le Chiffre in Casino Royale play a more complex and compelling character? Mikkelsen is a self-admitted comic book fan, which makes his entry into the MCU even more disappointing. We've seen some great actors stuck in unfortunately limited roles, so now let's talk about the original roadie, Clarence Howard. Okay, just kidding. We think Don Cheadle is the best guy for the role, but there are plenty of other actors who can't say the same. Let's talk about one of the most controversial moments in MCU history, Iron Man 3, or more specifically, the Mandarin. He's a popular comic book character, which means fans' expectations were at an all-time high. And what could be better than having incredible actor Ben Kingsley in the role? He'd been in prestigious flicks like Schindler's List and Gandhi, so making him the infamous Mandarin would have been amazing. You'll never see me coming. Yeah. Instead, the big twist of the movie was that Kingsley wasn't the real Mandarin, just a washed-up actor named Trevor Slattery. Kingsley is way too good of an actor to just play a bad one on the big screen. Instead of seeing a great comic book character brought to life on the big screen, we saw Kingsley take a role that wasn't at all fitting of his considerable talents. Fans deserved better than the Mandarin we saw in Iron Man 3, and Ben Kingsley deserved a better part in the MCU. The Mandarin isn't the only comic book character who got a less than exciting big screen adaptation in the MCU. Remember the Incredible Hulk movie? If you don't, you're not alone, since most of us pretend Edward Norton playing Bruce Banner never happened. No offense to Mr. Norton, but Mark Ruffalo is the Hulk we recognize in the MCU at this point. But Norton wasn't the only star whose time in the MCU wasn't what he thought it would be. When Tim Blake Nelson was approached about the project, he couldn't have been more excited to join the MCU as Samuel Stearns. He's been in plenty of films, including Oh Brother, Where Art Thou, and The Ballad of Buster Scruggs, and was excited about doing something different. Nelson says he was excited about the Samuel Stearns he saw in the script, and perhaps even more excited at making a multi-Marvel movie deal. He was told that signing on to the Incredible Hulk would get him into at least 3 movies, but as we all know, that never happened. Instead, he became a part of one of those Marvel moments that never ended up going anywhere, like Adam Warlock being teased at the end of Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, although we're still holding out hope on that one. Stearns never fully transformed into the brilliant but maniacal leader, and hopefully Nelson isn't waiting for Marvel to tag him back in. Unfortunately, there were quite a few actors who were done dirty when it came to casting them in the MCU, and Sam Rockwell is one of them. But according to a Reddit AMA, Rockwell would be happy to rejoin the MCU. He's expecting a call from the Avengers any day now. There have been tons of villains in the MCU, but they don't have a particularly good survival rate. Unlike most of his insidious peers, Rockwell's character Justin Hammer managed to survive his movie, meaning he could come back at some point, but let's be honest, he probably won't. Justin Hammer was one of the highlights of Iron Man 2, and many fans wish he had got more screen time. He wasn't one of the brightest villains, nor did he have any superpowers, so the fact that he was so entertaining is definitely a testament to Rockwell's skills as an actor. In fact, even the folks at Marvel know how talented he is, since he was once in consideration to play Tony Stark in the first Iron Man. Of course, we're all glad Robert Downey Jr. got the part, ad-libbed I Am Iron Man, and launched the MCU as we know it today. But surely Rockwell could have at least gotten a better consolation prize than this role. Aaron Taylor Johnson. Sometimes it's hard to know who to blame when a great actor is stuck in a second-rate role, but in the case of Aaron Taylor Johnson, we know exactly who to blame. Age of Ultron director Joss Whedon. Of course, blaming Whedon for things is practically a rite of passage, so why would this movie be any different? Going into the film, Whedon was determined to make sure that at least one main character didn't survive in order to show that there's always a price that needs to be paid in battle. At first, Clint Barton's Hawkeye was on the chopping block, but ultimately we ended up losing Pietro Maximoff instead. This was the first time we got to see Aaron Taylor Johnson's portrayal of the snarky hero Quicksilver. And unfortunately, it was also his last. Many fans were hoping that this would be one of those classic Marvel fakeouts, but no, it appears he's genuinely gone for good, at least for now. Since his sister Wanda Maximoff is becoming a more major character, some fans are hoping we haven't seen the last of Quicksilver. She'll be returning in Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, as well as her own show WandaVision on Disney+. According to the alleged leaked script, the show could involve her kids who talk about their uncle. We lost Vision twice during Infinity War, so if he's coming back, maybe there's hope for Aaron Taylor Johnson to reprise his role of Quicksilver after all. In the early days of the MCU, the villains often failed to impress, and romantic storylines seemed to be an unnecessary distraction. We thought we had gotten past that, but then Doctor Strange arrived to prove us wrong. Rachel McAdams is an award-winning actress who knows how to make even unpleasant characters compelling. She was Regina George in Mean Girls and Allie in The Notebook, yet her role in a movie filled with magic was her least interesting. Her character, Christine Palmer, was treated terribly by Stephen Strange, and yet she continually tried to comfort him because he's the star of the movie. She wasn't really an interesting character on her own, and seemingly only existed in order to further Strange's character development. In the comics, Christine has her own adventures, and it would have been great to see McAdams taking on the role of a night nurse. But since Jane Foster is getting brought back as Mighty Thor, maybe there's hope for McAdams too. Which characters do you think were criminally underutilized in the MCU? And which actors do you think should have had bigger roles? Tell us about your ideal casting choices in the comments section below. And don't forget to click subscribe for more new videos from us here at ScreenRant. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you again next time.